A velvet case, a polished table, and a silence so thick inside Clarence's house that nobody dared speak first. That is where this story starts. King Charles reached across and closed the lid himself. Nobody else touched it. Nobody else was allowed to. And the people standing in that room, senior advisors, royal custodians, people who had spent their whole careers managing palace decisions, they all understood what had just happened without a single word being said. Inside that case was one of Princess Diana's most treasured tiaras, and Camilla was not getting it. Now look, royal jewelry decisions happen all the time. Pieces get moved around. State events require planning. Their royal collection is enormous, and managing it is genuinely complicated work. On any normal day, this kind of conversation would have been handled quietly, filed away, and forgotten before the week was over. But this was not a normal day. And this was not a normal tiara. This particular piece had been photographed on Diana's head during some of the most emotional moments of her public life. It wasn't just decoration. For millions of people around the world, it was part of who she was, part of her story, part of the sadness and the strength they saw in her every time she stepped in front of a camera. So when word started moving through palace corridors that Camilla's office had been exploring access to legacy jewels, including pieces directly tied to Diana's memory, the reaction behind closed doors was not calm. It was not routine. It was closer to panic. And then Charles stepped in. Accounts from people familiar with the situation describe his decision as surprisingly firm, not emotional, not dramatic, just firm. The kind of decision that makes a room go quiet because everyone present understands the weight of it immediately. William and Catherine were informed shortly after. They said nothing publicly. They didn't need to. What many people don't realize is that this moment wasn't really about jewelry at all. It was about something the royal family has been quietly wrestling with for nearly 30 years. Who controls Diana's legacy? Who gets to touch it? Who gets to claim it? And who gets told, plainly and without apology, that they cannot? That question has never fully been answered. And this tiara just forced the palace to face it again. To understand why this particular piece carries so much weight, you have to go back to who Diana actually was inside that institution. She was not simply a princess who wore beautiful things. She was a young woman who entered one of the most powerful families in the world, felt completely alone inside it, and somehow managed to make hundreds of millions of people love her for exactly that vulnerability. The jewels she wore during that period weren't just accessories. They became part of the emotional record of her life. Every photograph, every appearance, every public moment got stored in the public's memory alongside whatever she was wearing. That tiara in particular became connected to a version of Diana that people still grieve. Not the glamorous version, the real version. The one who was clearly struggling. The one who smiled for cameras while carrying things nobody in that family seemed willing to acknowledge. Royal historians have long understood that certain pieces from Diana's collection carry an emotional charge that has nothing to do with their monetary value. William grew up knowing this. He didn't just inherit his mother's public image, he inherited the responsibility of protecting it. And insiders suggest that for years, he has treated Diana's most personal jewels as something separate from the broader royal collection. Not legally separate necessarily, but emotionally separate, symbolically separate. The quiet understanding inside palace circles, according to multiple sources, was that those pieces belonged to Diana's direct line, to her sons, and eventually to their families. Princess Charlotte, some reports suggest, may one day carry forward key pieces connected to her grandmother's public identity. That idea, Diana's legacy passing through her granddaughter, gave those jewels a meaning beyond grief. It made them feel like something that could heal rather than just hurt. Catherine reportedly understood this better than almost anyone outside the immediate family. She had spent years honoring Diana without ever appearing to imitate her. It was a careful, deliberate balance, wearing a particular ring to a particular event, referencing Diana's charity work without turning it into performance. That kind of restraint takes discipline, and it comes from genuinely understanding what the stakes are. The stakes, simply put, are this: Diana still matters more to the British public than the palace is always comfortable admitting. This is what made the situation around Camilla and the tiara so dangerous. It wasn't just about one piece of jewelry, it was about what happens when the public sees something they recognize as Diana's being absorbed into the life of the woman many still associate with Diana's heartbreak. The comparisons between Diana and Camilla never fully went away. They quieted down. They became less frequent. But they never disappeared. And inside the palace, advisors knew that one careless image, Camilla at a state event wearing something the world recognized from Diana, could bring all of that back overnight. These are not hypothetical fears. The palace communications team has reportedly spent years carefully managing exactly this kind of visual storytelling. Every public appearance is calculated. Every jewelry choice at a major event goes through multiple layers of review. The idea that something this sensitive could slip through, or worse, that it was being pursued deliberately, sent alarm bells through the traditional custodians of the royal collection. Some senior figures inside the palace reportedly opposed the direction of the planning from the beginning. They argued, quietly but seriously, that no matter what title Camilla held, there were emotional boundaries that rank alone could not erase. And the problem, according to insiders, was that those conversations had been getting more frequent, more persistent. The requests weren't being dropped, they were circling back. That is when the matter reportedly reached Charles. For most of his adult life, King Charles was caught between two stories that the world could not reconcile. There was Diana's story, the young woman who was loved, who suffered, who died before her time. And there was his story, the man who had loved someone else while married to her, who eventually married that someone else, and who was now asking the world to accept both truths at once. The world largely moved on. Camilla became queen. The coronation happened. The protests were smaller than some expected. Life inside the monarchy continued. But moving on is not the same as forgetting. And Charles, better than almost anyone, knew that. So when the tiara situation landed in his hands, he was not operating from a position of comfort. He was a king dealing with serious illness, a fragile public mood, a family still managing multiple internal tensions, and a monarchy that could not afford another major controversy tied to Diana's name. Insiders describe his decision as coming quickly. No long meetings, no committee reviews, no careful palace process. He stopped it. And that was that. For the people in that room, the speed of the decision was almost as striking as the decision itself. Charles is not typically someone who moves fast. He deliberates, he considers, he weighs things from multiple angles. But on this particular occasion, according to those familiar with the moment, there was no deliberation. He saw what was being proposed, understood what it meant, and closed it down before it could go any further. Some royal watchers interpreted this as Charles finally drawing a line he should have drawn much earlier. Others saw it as a man trying to protect multiple things at once: his wife's dignity, his son's trust, and a monarchy that was one bad headline away from a very difficult month. What palace insiders found genuinely surprising was not that he made the decision, it was how clearly he made it. William and Catherine apparently learned of the intervention through private channels, not through any official announcement. There was no formal statement, no memo distributed through royal offices. Just a quiet word passed through the right people to let them know the situation had been handled. Their response, reportedly, was relief, not celebration, not vindication, just relief. Because for William especially, this was never about winning anything. It was about making sure his mother's most recognizable symbols did not end up folded into a narrative that had already caused enough damage. That felt like a real risk. And the fact that his father had seen it the same way apparently meant something significant to him. Camilla's inner circle, on the other hand, reportedly absorbed the news very differently. Here is the truth that the palace is working very hard to keep contained. This decision didn't just settle a jewelry dispute, it drew a visible line inside the royal family. And everyone on both sides of that line now knows exactly where it sits. For Camilla's supporters, the refusal felt like another reminder of something they have never been able to fully escape. No matter how established her position becomes, no matter how many state events she attends or how many duties she fulfills beside the king, there are still places inside this institution where the door does not fully open for her. They would argue, and some have argued, privately, that Camilla continues to be judged for choices made decades ago, that no matter what she does going forward, a portion of the palace and a large portion of the public will always see her through the lens of what happened to Diana, and that this tiara decision proved it. That argument is not entirely without sympathy. Camilla has worked to fulfill her role with genuine commitment. She has not sought drama. She has not courted controversy. But the counter-argument is just as clear, and it comes from people who watch Diana's life very closely. Some symbols are not transferable. Some histories are not ours to rewrite. Diana's most beloved pieces carry an emotional meaning that belongs to her sons, her grandchildren, and the millions of people who still feel her loss personally. That is not cruelty toward Camilla. That is simply the reality of what those objects have become. Palace staff, according to multiple accounts, described the atmosphere after the decision as noticeably cooler. Conversations shorter, movements more careful. The easy confidence that had surrounded Camilla's expanded role in palace life reportedly pulled back a little. Not dramatically, not visibly from the outside, but noticeably to people inside. The monarchy was doing what it always does in moments like this, holding its breath, hoping nothing else spills. What this situation also revealed, uncomfortably, is the growing tension between the current reign and the future household of William and Catherine. Every decision Charles makes right now is being watched through two lenses simultaneously. What does it mean today, and what does it signal about the transition ahead? The tiara dispute landed right in the middle of that tension. It forced a choice between loyalty to his wife and protection of his son's inheritance, not financial inheritance, but emotional inheritance. The legacy William will carry into his own reign. Charles reportedly found that position genuinely painful. He did not want to hurt Camilla. He has spent decades making choices that centered around protecting her. But this one was different. This one had Diana's name on it in a way that made neutrality impossible. And when neutrality was impossible, he chose protection. What happens next inside those walls is harder to read. The palace will continue to present a united front publicly. Appearances will be coordinated. Statements will remain carefully vague. The silence will be managed, as it always is. But the line is drawn now, and it is visible to everyone who matters. Diana has been gone for nearly 30 years. Her sons are grown men with their own families, their own futures, their own complicated relationships with the institution that shaped them. The world has changed around her memory in ways nobody could have predicted when that car crashed in a Paris tunnel in 1997. And yet, here we are. A velvet case on a polished table, a king closing a lid, a room going silent. Because some stories don't end just because enough time passes. Some names still move through rooms before anyone speaks. Some memories still carry more power than any title currently in use. Diana is gone. But inside the House of Windsor, she is everywhere. And on this particular occasion, she won.